Hello, everybody. Hope you're well. Matt Stevens here. Time for another Skoda podcast or videocast. My guest today is a good friend of mine, a chap called Tom Southam. He's been a direct sportif of the World Tour team, EF Education-EasyPost, since 2017. He's a decorated rider himself. But in today's conversation, we take a deep dive into what it takes to be a director sportif in the here and now. We look ahead to the Tour de France next year. We pick out some of his highlights from 2023, and we do another deep dive into the importance of communication out on the road, especially given this new era of dynamic racing. I hope you enjoy it. I certainly did. Tom, thanks for joining us, mate. It's been a little while. Whereabouts? Well, I know where you are, but the people who are watching this might not know where you are. So just tell us where you are, bud.
I am in Melbourne, Australia, where we spend half the year. So my wife's Australian, and we do half the year in here, and then half the year in the UK when the racing season's on. I say UK, and then travel.
Yeah.
But yeah, so over here for a bit, which is nice. I haven't seen winter, I don't think, for I think 14 years now, which is not a bad run.
You're making me feel a bit envious, mate. And you I've never really said this, but you have, maybe for a little while, you have picked up a little, because you're from my part of the world, but my dad's part of the world, from Cornwall. One of the most, still to me, one of the most magical parts of the world, mate. But you have picked up a bit of an Aussie twang, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've never had much of a Cornish accent, and spending time obviously with my wife, I tend to pick it up. I shared a room with your dad once. Do you remember that?
Oh gosh, was it at a race?
The Girvan.
It was at the Girvan.
The Girvan, and there was no room. There was no room. I was in a different team, and there was no room for your dad or something. And you had to ask me if you minded if he shared a room with me. It was good.
Yeah, I do remember.
He came in after about 3 pints of Guinness, I think, every night. It was great.
I think it might have been more than that, and more than that. Just to put things in context for my international viewers, the Girvan was a big bike race in the UK back in the day that sadly no longer with us, in Scotland. And Tom was riding for a team called Halfords, weren't you? With Rob Hales, a good colleague of ours, and I was riding for a rival team. And my dad came and stayed, and somehow I'd mucked up the booking, and he ended up showing with you. And you had to race the next day, and you didn't get much sleep, did you? Because he was mumbling.
No.
Anyway,
he was talking all night. Yeah, that's quite the experience.
Well, that's yeah. I hope you're not too scarred from that, because you've from that experience with my dad in Scotland, you've gone from strength to strength. Here you are, one of the biggest world tour teams. You know, maybe that was the catalyst to your success, mate.
Yeah, it could have been. I can never come to the Girvan again. I need to get my arse in gear.
Right.
No, I enjoyed the Girvan.
Yeah, it was a cracking race. Yeah. Yes, it was one of my favourite races back in the day. But to the current, Tom, you've been with EF now 2017. Am I right?
The first year. Yep.
Yeah. So over that period of time, I mean, you've become one of the most respected DSs out there, you know, and you've obviously stayed with the team. You've been working with Charly, another ex-teammate of ours, for a long time now. A quick question about your experience, just briefly. What do you think is the most important quality to be a good DS?
I think, I mean, certainly one of the things I keep in my mind is something that John Herity told me, which is that you have to be constantly moving and constantly changing and constantly accepting that what you did know before isn't necessarily, it has a value, but it's not necessarily right. And it's also not going to be understood by the riders that are coming through. So the sport's changing, the riders are changing, and it's all going very, very quickly. And if you don't change and adapt and learn new things, and try to understand how to communicate with someone who's now 20 years younger than me, you know, and that's like on average for a DS. then you very quickly fall into that kind of just an old ex cyclist guy who wants to tell us what to do,
Yeah.
And I think I think when you jump, you get off the bike, which is, most people's experience is they've been an ex-rider. They start de-essing and they're very vibrant and they're very current and the riders all like them because they can relate to them. They speak their language. They might know them a bit. They feel like they've got their best interests at heart. Whereas a DS who's 10, 15 years down the track, the riders generally can get the impression if they do it wrong, it's just like, he's just telling us what to do, and he's doing it because he's making us do something. And you never want to be in a confrontational thing. You're on the same side. You do want to be able to tell someone or have a robust enough relationship with someone that you can tell them they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people aren't getting stuff right, and that's something that's getting more challenging because the riders are more confident now than they ever have been. They come from development teams that are, as very well organized, very well run. They know a great deal. So it's not like there's less respect, but there's certainly a lot more confidence from a young rider's side. So you have to give them the freedom to kind of have that, have their confidence, but also trust that you can actually say, hang on a minute, that's not the way to do things. So I guess, to answer your question in short, it is kind of changing and evolving and always being relevant, I think.
Yeah. It's spoken to, obviously, over the years, been on the ground at races, a lot of different DSs, and that's a really interesting point of view. And I remember back starting off as an amateur, and even in the early days as being a pro, it wasn't overly two-way, the conversation. It could traditionally, cycling, director sportifing, managing, cycling is traditionally a very conservative sport and quite dictatorial, depending on the culture of the team. It's like, you do this, otherwise, that's it. There was some riders, I guess, the more results they got, they could have been a bit more two-way, but now, as you say, I would imagine it's far more of a discussion than just you telling riders what to do. Of course, there's a point, when a call's got to be made where you've got to, you are the manager, the buck stops there. But I would imagine it is definitely a far more two-way process than it used to be.
Absolutely, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. I've never aspired to. I didn't do very well when I was just told what to do.
Yeah.
Like if as a rider I had some equity in what was happening and I was involved, whether or not because I work with John a lot, and I know that he kind of would have thought, okay, well, I'm going to get what I want by letting this rider think that they're choosing the path. That may well have been the case, but it certainly got better results out of me. There is an element, though. I mean, you can't be a guy who just walks into a room and says, "What should we do, guys? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do?" Because ultimately, riders want to be told, And if I'm going to say to someone, right, your job is to 1 kilometer 150, it's fine if they say, why is that my job, and why am I not doing something later on? I can explain it to them.
Yeah.
But I think it's gone much more in that kind of direction these days. I mean, some guys will blindly go, yep, okay, no worries. I mean, Tom Scully, who worked with me for 7 years, you say to Tom, right, I want you to drop whoever it is off third wheel at this point. It was just like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. But I think Tom was from sort of another generation. He learned, and he grew up in a similar kind of like traditional, sort of staunch way of doing things, and that's changed a lot. I think like on a big scale, if you think back to, let's say, the 80s, the team DS was also the team manager.
Yeah.
That's the guy who has the sponsors, who does your contracts. There were probably there was less influence from rider managers between the two. So it's like, if if a DS now has a disagreement with a rider, then generally that rider goes and complains to their manager, who then calls the general manager of the team and has the discussion. So it's like that dynamic's changed.
Yeah.
Rider managers have a lot more power than they probably used to, and influence, and it's kind of that's changing things. So not that it forces us to be unnecessarily collaborative, because I think it's still a good way of working, but
yeah,
it is definitely changing. And as well, I think people aren't 19, 20-year-olds aren't used to being spoken to in the way that, you don't get a clip round the ear when you're a kid these days.
no.
And it's not that long ago where the idea of discipline was quite different, and you grew up, and so there's all that cultural shift as well, and it's our job to take that into account and realize you can't just yell at someone on a bus and expect them to react like someone from T-Mobile would have done.
No. Yeah.
Even if you want to.
Yeah. Even if you sometimes feel like these guys deserve a bit of yeah. It's
but that being said, sometimes that works, and sometimes you have to do it, and sometimes that can be very effective. Not just screaming and shouting, but certainly someone like me who's quite. I don't often raise my voice or want to.
You're quite calm. You're quite a calm. I mean, we've never actually worked together in the sense of being DS, but I do get the sense every time I come up to you at the Giro or the Tour or wherever it is, you're very calming, mate. I mean, I'm quite a relaxed guy, but and you and Charly, very similar. You just like float around the paddock, and and there's a lot going on. It's crazy at the start of a Tour stage, and there's a lot going on, but there's a really nice kind of feeling I get around you. You're just like, this is like an oasis of calm, because there's a lot going on. There's every year, and I know the workload for a DS now, year on year, the amount of metrics, the amount of tech that enables you to have all this information to then somehow disseminate and try and filter through what's just noise and what's important. You have to remain pretty focused, don't you? And I guess that's the best way to be. You are quite a Zen guy, if you don't mind me saying.
I mean, it's all a facade. It all goes out the window once I'm behind the wheel of the car. But I think like sometimes, I mean, there are moments when it does get super stressful. But then again, it's like you don't want to relay that to anyone, because everybody's looking at you, whether you know it or not. And it took me a while to learn this as a DS. It's like the words that you say have an impact, and people think about them.
Yeah,
and I've still got moments that like a DS would have said something to me that's lasted with me throughout the rest of my career, which might have just been an offhand comment from them. Just like you need to think about how people look at how they're seeing you. And I remember, I think it was Tour of California a few years ago. We had Higuita finished third on the stage and did a really good stage, but Taylor Phinney was out of time cut, and I was quite stressed about that because I felt like, I want to keep in the race.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, Charly was like, "You have to go away and sort yourself out, because you look as glum as shit, and everyone's looking at you. So you can't be around looking like this, because we're actually in a good position. And even though he's gone, that's just hard luck." So yeah, always learning.
Yeah. And that's an interesting, that it's quite a small, it is almost like offhand, but then if you've never been told that before, it makes you acutely aware. I mean, and as somebody that the riders will look to stable the ship and to look for direction, that's massively important. Whatever's going on inside, as a manager and as somebody who is part of that communications hub, making those dynamic decisions, pre-race, during the race, post-race, you actually, are responsible for the mood as well in the team. There's obviously characters within the squad that help the riders themselves. You've got characters that help carry a team through difficult times, but ultimately that consistency, they look to you for stability. So that's actually quite it's quite a thing that would stay with you. I remember back in the police, somebody's on my first ever shift after my training, and these stay with me. It's not so much a cycling context, but it kind of can be used anywhere really. Is my tutor put me to one side before we went out on my night shift, and he said, "Matt, couple of words of advice. Don't try and be anybody but yourself, and you'll never get tangled up. Do not be anybody but you. And I was like, it's so simple, but it makes so much sense. There's no pretense. It's just like, I'm just going to be me. Because once you try and start being somebody else, you just can't last. It's not sustainable. But these little nuggets that you carry all through your life. And I mentioned it quite a lot because it's such a simple thing, but it stays with me. But they're important, aren't they?
I think that's 100%. I mean, probably, yeah, equally as valuable as the most important thing as a DS is to be yourself.
Yeah.
Because the instant, like, you have impressions of what a DS should be. And I think that's what I did when I started. I mean, I didn't do a lot of I never rode the tour or anything like that. So I had a knowledge gap when it came to the races. And your instinct is to try and protect that by acting like you know more than you do or you don't. But actually, you're respected much more for being good at what you can be good at and being who you are and being quite true to that. And then you're genuine. And it's the same, you read about any sort of football manager or any sports manager, and the best ones are the ones who are just kind of, that is who I am, yeah. I find it takes you a while to work that out. It seems like a simple thing, but you have to work it out.
Yeah, because I guess we're all, in many, many ways, we've got so many influences in our life, people that inspired us, people that we think, well, that's great, that's a lovely trait, or that's something I would avoid. So we are the product of ultimately the things that attract us, our environments as kids, our working environment. So, but through that, you've got to find your way through and still be you whilst learning at the same time, but not fundamentally lose who you are. And in your role, especially now, Tom, given, just back to your first point about adapting and constantly changing, and just for anybody else again listening, John Herity was a manager of both of ours through, I mean, was about 11 years between us in terms of age, but John was a manager of both of us at separate times, including finally the Rapha team, where you were before you retired. And back with Great Britain now, isn't he? Looking after the lads after a big absence. So that's quite an interesting one. But over the last few years, I mean, this is the crux of what I want to talk about today, Tom. Was the sport has utterly changed, hasn't it? And in so many different ways. And it's always a theme of conversations, because I find it immensely interesting. Because my job as somebody who commentates on races, looks at races, tries to analyze them, deconstruct them, I'm kind of left scratching my head, but in a wonderful way. And you're looking at speaking to riders, staff, managers, and they've picked out, but we're still kind of learning to adapt. So how have you enjoyed this let's call it the post-COVID years? Because in the last 3 years, racing doesn't look anything like it did in 2019 or 2018, does it?
No, I think COVID, for whatever reason, did flip the switch. I think it did a big reset, for like a hard reset for a lot of people who had never had a chance to actually train, to pause, to look after themselves. And when they came back racing, in the last week, I've been rewatching the tour, kind of like looking at how the breaks go on the days the breaks go. And man, it's just, you're just watching these guys go from behind the red car and just hammering, like absolutely hammering, but like not kind of mid quality, with all due respect, riders who are going to get in a breaks from with a tour stage. We're talking about like proper like classics winners. I mean, if you look at the stage that Mohoric won, the guys in that group,
oh my god,
it's just like, it's like there's no room. And like in the 90s or the 2000s, whatever, you might get your odd guy who went into a break and then chipped off and won a tour stage, a French guy or someone who is like a lesser light. It just can't happen now. And I think the tour's on another level because it's so exaggerated. But even, Amstel, we set off, the break went, UAE didn't really care what the gap was to the break or who was in it. They rode, and then at 100 Ks to go, the race was split, and it never came back together. so when I first did Amstel, it would be like, okay, well, there's the three climbs that come one after another. I can't remember their names now, but that lead to the really, really steep one there. The race is going to be together until there. You need to be in position there, and then it's going to go. But now it's like, okay, it's going to happen probably 100 Ks out or before, you know. Liège is what used to be just a sort of sprint up the final climb is they were in bits by the time they got to La Redoute this year.
I know.
So, I mean, it's brilliant to watch. It's fantastic. I think. I mean, guys that like obviously that like fueling has been a big thing where guys have got a lot more fuel to burn and they're not running out of fuel, and you're not seeing guys like bonking, you know, like we used to back in the day. Guys are pretty aerodynamic, you know. Everyone's got aero socks on and tiny little handlebars, so the speed's going up and up. And I think then you add in the factor that, you know, 5 years ago, maybe the top 20 guys on GC would go to an altitude camp before a Grand Tour.
Yeah.
But nowadays, the first rider who starts pulling on the first stage, so basically the first Domestique in line, has also spent 3 weeks at altitude, you know, with Remco or whoever. And then they come down for a little bit. And then between another race, they go to altitude. So the preparation's just up here, but it's not just up here for the top guys, it's up here for every single person in the team. So the level's super high. And they're, as such, guys are racing differently, you know, they're taking more risks to attack earlier, which is, I think, great to watch. I mean, one of the things I've looked at quite a lot is how often the first guy to attack in a break at the Tour doesn't get caught anymore. Mohoric has done it a few times where it's like 60 Ks to go. Oh, come on, never going to get there. But then you learn from that and you go, we need to know this and we need to pass this information on, and people need to be ready for this sort of stuff. So I enjoy it. I enjoy it because I do listen to, you know, you listen to some, you know, people who aren't so intensely involved in it talking about how the race is going to go, and you're just like, man, even in 10 years, it's changed completely. So
yeah,
it's hard to keep up.
I find it absolutely fascinating. And how do you tactically? Well, what are the team meetings like now then, in terms of structure? I mean, there obviously is a plan, but given the unpredictable nature of the racing, and everybody, the word on everybody's lips is anticipation, and this is into the women's peloton as well. I was having a chat with actually Alison Jackson the other day about the races opening up earlier, and so you're having to think completely differently and be a bit bolder in terms of taking risks, but knowing that actually you can carry yourself to the end of a race because of the fueling differently, but because everybody is anticipating, the races are opening up earlier and earlier and earlier, because the definition of anticipation is to do something in advance of something. So if everybody's doing something in advance, you're going to go backwards and you're going to start opening up the race from kilometer zero, which we're seeing is happening in, I mean, the Giro d'Italia this year, and on the stage that Ben ultimately won, Ben Healy. Oh my God, the guy was full gas from kilometer zero. And I was commentating with Ned and we were looking at this, and we know Ben, and he'd already had an amazing season. We're like, well, how can he sustain this? And you kind of know the kind of numbers these guys are putting out in 15 Ks, 20 Ks, and they've got 190 Ks to do with the hilly finale. But that's what it takes to break away now. And really, the break didn't settle till 70 Ks in. And then they could finally take a brief breath, knock off 20 or 30 watts, 50 watts, and then go again in the final. The intensity is absolutely nuts. But so what's your kind of job now? How do you control that? And how do you make plans for those sorts of scenarios? Because it must be wildly different. I mean, because a lot of the formulas that we previously had, some still hold true, but a lot of them are out the window now, aren't they? So how does it? What's the new team meeting look like in nowadays, mate?
I mean, like really simple example was always that, you know, in the Sky years, there was this thing whereby basically you had this one team that was always going to ride, right? So it's kind of a simple, do they want the break to go or not? If they do, then be in it, and if they don't, then you don't need to be in it. And now that doesn't, I mean, Visma plays a big role in that, in what they want to do, you know, because they can ride things down, and they do ride things down. But I think, I mean, for me, I think it comes down to your own style, management wise. Personally, I like to simplify the message more and more and more, because we went very far down the kind of like, okay, now we're going to go down here and the road's going to get bigger, and then we're going to go up here and it's smaller, and you can nip along this little bit, and you know, the wind might do this or it might do that, or. But I think, like, you need to put a little bit back onto the riders as racers, and make the message abundantly clear as to, like, okay, look, we're going to try and win today with Ben in the break.
Yeah.
Let's say. Really, the rest, like all of the information from Velaview and that sort of stuff, I can give to them on the radio. So I just say, look, trust me, I'm going to tell you what's coming up. Here's a brief overview. They can look at it the day before. I don't want to spend 45 minutes talking about the roads. We just need to make sure that at this point we support this person to get into the front, because really, in a lot of races, I mean, there's the race to get into the break, and then there's then there's a different race.
Yeah.
Once you're in the break, right? So the race to get into the break is probably the harder part, which can take more resources. And what you need to know there as a rider is who the wrong person and who the right person is. So you pull or you don't pull. Yeah. So if Cepeda's there and we know it's like a flat finish and he's going to have no chance, he needs to know already before the race starts, I'm not the guy today. I'm here. It's okay. I'm here. We've got a presence, but I'm not going to pull.
Yeah.
I'm going to wait till things change. Or, oh shit, there's nobody there. One of us needs to kick this race off straight away. And those things I can't deal with from the car because it's too slow, you know?
Okay.
The TV's 30 seconds behind. They have to just have like a really clear idea. As like a simple thing, it's like, okay, let's get this person in here. And yeah, I mean, you might say, okay, we're going to start uphill, or you're going to go downhill for 2K, and then it kicks up, and it's more than likely it's going to go there. But I like to give them less sort of route information and more kind of overall big picture. This is what we're trying to do, with whom, why, and trust me that you're going to get everything you need from the car as we go.
That's really, really, really interesting, because we touched on it briefly about 5 minutes ago, where you've got so many data sets that are available now. There's so much information, and which on one hand is really good because it's very helpful. But on the other hand, is all of it really that important? When you think back to, you know, riders know that they can sense what's coming up. They've got maps on their phone. You know, cutting through all that noise is massively important, isn't it? And simplifying the message gives space in a rider's mind, especially a road captain, for example, or somebody who's making the calls on the road that has to take that responsibility. And rather than being fed information all the time, that a lot of them, there's going to be a lot of overlap. So it's like, okay, let's keep that message clear. So you've got bandwidth in your brain to be able to make these decisions very clearly and at the right kind of moments without hesitating and being burdened by almost too much information. And I guess that's striking a balance, isn't it? Because there is some information on the road that's really, really important, especially if it's fresh. It's come from, you know, something dynamics happen. There's like a real narrowing point or roadworks or something like that, or the wind's got up and there's an exposed part, you know. But ultimately, you know, the roads are the roads, aren't they? And I find that really quite interesting, to give the riders that bandwidth to focus on the job at hand and a clear message. I think I'd act far better than just getting fed information all the time, because you get tired of it as well, don't you? It's overwhelming.
Yeah. I think, like, you know, if you say to a guy, it's like, okay, you're going through a town, there's a roundabout. to be honest with you, if you're in a line in a peloton, you're just going to follow the wheel in front of you, and you're not going to know you've gone around a roundabout. To be honest, especially the speeds they're going now. So that sort of stuff you try and filter out. You might have a meeting point, but again, like it used to be like, okay, here's the climb, meeting point 5Ks before, then it's 10Ks before, then it's 20Ks before,
and
now it's 30Ks before, and then you've got to get on one side of the road, and you've got to hold that side of the road, and that's going to burn rider X, Y, and Z. And then you're left just getting to, and that's another thing that affects the gap to the break, is that any race where there's a climb, they generally tend to put climbs, in the Basque Country do this a lot, they tend to put climbs on very narrow roads. Big road into narrow road on climb. So every breakaway loses 30 seconds to 45 seconds just on the run-in with the pressure of the peloton.
It's not even an actual chase, it's just momentum, isn't it? Yeah.
So, I mean, I was in a car last year, and we had 3 minutes in the break in Basque Country, and they didn't want to catch the break, but the bunch sped up so fast to come into this climb. And I was actually sat in the car thinking, they're going to be up our arse and they're not going to get the cars past. We're going to have one of those like absolute disasters. And basically they got back to, in a short stretch of road, they got back to 1 minute and 5. And then all of a sudden people thought, oh, race is back on here. Break didn't make it. And it was a day where it was like, the GC team wanted the break to go. The break was gone. It had 3.5 minutes. It was totally done. But just by the nature of the course and the way the bunch races, it changed it all. So
And you must enjoy this period as well, because you're somebody who has adapted and learned, and it's really interesting you said that. I mean, about you haven't ridden the Tour de France, but I like the fact that that's not a problem, because you've settled so well into the team, and learning all the time. And I don't know, you must find, I guess, Tom, quite a lot of job satisfaction doing what you're doing now, especially in this new period where you're having to learn. And it's almost like the teams that I think, apart from teams that have very strong riders, the teams that are going to benefit from this style of racing are teams that can have people like managers, DSs, riders that can critically think. I think it's okay. You've got to be super, super strong. The depth and talent is amazing now, and some of the best riders are doing stuff that is incredible. But the way to cut through this is to increasingly thinking about how you race is massively important, isn't it? And you're a thinker, aren't you? And do you find that quite invigorating?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I spend the off season doing a lot of like a lot of thought. I put a lot of thought in it. I mean, even if it seems like I'm doing nothing, I spend a lot of time thinking about how to improve things and how I can do things better and what we can do to get the riders to go better. And it's almost a creative act. So which I like using that part of my brain. And I get a real kick out of that, because it's fun to sort of look at what you're doing and come up with other ways to do it better or faster, or create circumstances which are going to allow you to win, with what you've got. So, I mean, like I pointed this out to JV the other day, but I think we won 9 of our 24 races or whatever. We won solo this year. And to win a race solo, you need a much more specific set of circumstances than you do to win in a sprint. So you basically need someone to attack while nobody has teammates behind. And already to have created that situation, what you have had to do that, conditions play a role, weather plays a role, climbs, etc., etc. But all those sort of things I find really interesting.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I mean, I've loved the last few years. I've loved, I find it absolutely brilliant to watch. But can you pick a highlight from this season going into 2024? I'd imagine you got some camps just around the corner, mate, to go to welcome the new riders. But what's been a highlight for you for 2023, Tom?
I think my personal favorite moment, I think, because we were right there. So in Amstel, I think we were car 2 or 3, and we sort of got through everyone when Pogacar had dropped Ben and Pidcock. And we got just to, it was quite a long drive to get there because the cars are away, and we had to go
Yeah.
through all of like the groups and stuff. And we got there just before the Gula Hemmerberg, and we actually had Ineos car like up our ass, like beeping, beeping, beeping. I'm like, what are they so stressed about? And they got there and they shoved past us and basically gave Pidcock a rice cake with 15 k's to go. And I was like, all right, here we go then. Then we got to the next climb, and Ben attacked from the front and just did like this. It must have been about a minute and a half, like, and you could see the Pidcock just hanging, and eventually he cracked, and his head went down, and I was like, and this was before we really knew what Ben could be.
Yeah.
And you're just like, holy shit, because we could see Pogacar just like 150 meters in front, and you're like, then he went over and he went into the car, and there was that drama. Anyway, I think he would have beaten him in a sprint, but
Yeah.
it's by the by, and Ben took it well. But for that moment, it was like, because quite often in a race in the car, you're not right there. You're not actually seeing the action at the very, very thing unfold. Like at Liège, again, Ben was up there, and that's my favorite race by far. But we were stuck behind groups and watching the TV, which isn't quite the same. So, yeah. I mean, I love the Ardennes. It's my favorite week of the year. So, had a good one this year, which was
nice. It wasn't bad at all. Ben was absolutely flying, wasn't he? And obviously continued that form right the way through the year. But I remember, do you know what? I can't remember if I was commentating on it or just watching Amstel, because I commentate on that many bike races. But anyway, I remember when Ben was putting Tom under pressure, and I thought, what's he doing? Why don't they just work together? Because I thought this would be good. He's going to get a podium here. Tom's probably going to roll him in the sprint, but when he dropped him, I said it was again. I guess you felt that kind of you wouldn't have expected that to happen. That kind of strange. When you get a euphoric moment that's unexpected, it's quite and then you've got to temper your adrenaline, haven't you, and stuff like that. But I had that feeling just as a spectator. It was a wonderful moment. I know, like Tadej had obviously flown at that point, but that battle between two teammates behind, two riders that know each other well. And when you look at Ben's ability, how strong he is, how good he can manage his effort, but clearly being in a situation like that and then sensing a weakness of somebody, Tom's a ridiculously accomplished rider, but he obviously picked up on something that wasn't quite right, saw that exchange, that bit of food that he was having, and then just put him on the rack and just cracked him. And they're mates, and that's the sport at its purest, and they're special when you see them unfold, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I mean, it's actually a rarity for us to see that sort of like really firsthand from the car. A lot of the times the race happens, the TV's patchy, it goes in and out, and then you watch it later on in the evening, but it's not the same as the emotion of being there. And I mean, we're still just sat in the car behind, and like you said, I mean, we didn't know it was going to happen, and then when it did, it was quite a buzz. So that'd be a highlight for sure.
We're just briefly looking ahead to 2024 then. Obviously the team, the objective is to win bike races, mate. Of course, there's the point situation which teams are acutely aware of after year one of the three-year relegation promotion cycle. But my main question to you is like the tour. What are your thoughts on the route of the tour? It's an interesting one, mate, isn't it? And what opportunities do you think that EF have got there in terms of GC stages? Because it's a bit of a mix, but that last week is just insane, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the tour's got found, and like it's digging into its formula, shorter stages, harder stages, more action, more, which is suiting not different riders, but you can't ride a traditional race anymore. You've got to be on the go from the start. I mean, I think Richard finished the year. I don't know what the plans are next year yet. We've got training camp in a couple of weeks, and we're going to sit down and Charlie's working on the program, but certainly I think he fit, like, after a pretty disappointing tour this year, he finished the year on a good level in Italy, which has given him a good foundation to build
Yeah.
onto next year. And there should be, hopefully he's not put off by the negative experience this year, because I certainly think he could be, his quality as the races get that hard is going to shine. I'm getting incredibly dark here, I realise.
Yeah, you are. We can whack one light on, mate, for the finale.
It's fading. I don't think I've got another. I don't think I've got
I tell you
another
what,
light.
if you just turn your screen brightness up,
Would that help?
Yeah, it actually casts quite a lot. Although it's black around it, you might.
Hang on. Let's see.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's giving enough, mate. Yeah, you're back in the room, mate. Back in the room. That's better.
I realized I was slowly disappearing. As always, I think with Nielsen Paulus, he's the guy who could win a stage of a tour, and there's a lot of stages that are going to suit him. But last year he tried doing the Mountains Jersey. The year before he was he's 13th on GC, and it takes a lot out of him to be consistent for that long. So we need to use him just for one day and then switch off for 3 days and then do one day again, and try and win one. I think I've been behind Nielsen in breaks at the tour 3 times, and we've been 4th every time. So that's something he wants to get done, and he can.
Yeah.
And then we've got a lot of other sort of talented guys. Most of our new signings are youngsters.
Yeah.
We've got a big group of super talented youngsters, probably like the best influx we've ever had as a team. But that doesn't answer the Tour de France question.
Yeah.
Next year, that's longer term. So I think with Richard back in the game, which he will be next year, that will be our main sort of focus. And then, if you win one stage at the Tour, it changes your year, so yeah, take one of those if we can.
Definitely. No, well, I look forward to seeing how the guys get on next year, mate. And our paths will cross either. Do you know which races are you going to do, the Giro Tour or both, or do you know what you're doing, or Vuelta? Do you know yet? Do you have any idea, or is that out of your hands?
It's sort of out of my hands, but we generally tend to have. We've got a group of 8 DSs, and we generally tend to work around the races that we do. Like, we have our core races, So Cleo will do the classics. I do the Ardennes. Done the Giro once in the past. I normally do a Tour. I've done the World Tour as well. So yeah, we'll see. To be honest, what have I not done? Yeah, there's a few races I haven't done. I've never done any of the Northern Cobble Classics, but they're so specific, the knowledge there.
Yeah.
That would be like I would have to basically go to school for 2 years.
It'd be cool though, wouldn't it? It would be cool just to sort of mix it up a little bit. Because when you think about even if you just like I'm just going to shadow DS, like tell me what to do. I'm like a stagiaire DS or something. You jumped in the car and did that, but then to take that back to, especially to some of the, when those stages drop into the top, I just think that as many facets, without like detracting from what you're good at, that multifaceted approach. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of extra information. Oh, that's interesting. That tactic, take that back for a stage of the Tour next year. And I think that would be exciting, as long as there was no pressure on you, just to mix it up slightly. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure you will at some point do it, but again, it's all about winning bike races, and there's not a lot of room for just people gaining new experiences, is there? But sometimes could be quite interesting to see what you learn. You're going to take something away from it, aren't you?
Absolutely. No, it is one of my. I do at one stage want to do some of those races. It'd be cool.
Good stuff, mate. Well, Tom, it's always a pleasure, mate. You
indeed.
take care of yourself. Thanks for taking the time. I know it's pretty late in Australia, mate. It's pretty early here, as you can tell by my face. But
we got super lucky. My kids actually fell asleep like 5 minutes before I was on the call. Before that, they were crying. So
Oh, nice one,
Worked
mate.
out,
Well,
worked out nicely.
thank goodness, mate. Well, thanks very much, Tom. You take care, mate, and I'll catch up with
You
you on the
too.
road very soon, mate.
Nice one. All the best, Matt. Cheers, mate.
Cheers,
See
bud.
ya.
See you later.
Yeah.